Damien Rousseau never expected to find himself contemplating his own mortality at 35. A successful architectural engineer with his own firm, Damien had built a reputation for designing structures that could withstand almost anything. Yet the foundation of his personal life was far less stable than the steel and concrete masterpieces he created. The first cracks appeared 6 years into his marriage to Natalie. They met during his final year at Cornell, where her vibrant personality and artistic talent had drawn him in immediately. The early years had been good. They built a life together in Boston, purchased a Victorian townhouse that Damien had lovingly restored, and established what appeared to be a perfect life. Another late night at the gallery? Damien asked one evening, his voice flat as he watched Natalie rush through their front door at nearly midnight. "The installation is taking longer than expected," she replied, avoiding his eyes as she hung up her coat. "You know how Huxley is about his exhibitions." Damien nodded silently. Huxley Milan, the owner of the art gallery where Natalie worked as a curator, had become an increasingly common topic in their conversations over the past 8 months. Something in the way she spoke the man's name had triggered an uneasy feeling in Damien's gut, but he pushed it aside. After all, they'd been married for 6 years. They survived his startup phase when he worked 16-hour days. They weathered the storm when Natalie had lost her first curatorial position during budget cuts. They were solid. At least that's what he told himself until the headache started. It's probably just stress, his friend, Brendan Torres, had suggested during their weekly racquetball game. The Hamilton project is huge. Anyone would be feeling the pressure. But when Damien found himself unable to focus on blueprints, when the dizziness became so severe that he had to sit down during client meetings, he knew something was wrong. The MRI results had been devastating, a brain tumor requiring immediate surgery. "We caught it early, der," Kaminsky had assured him. "The procedure has a high success rate, but it's expensive and recovery will take time. Do you have someone who can help care for you?" Damien had nodded, thinking of Natalie and his parents, who lived just 2 hours away in Providence. His parents had always been distant, more focused on their social standing than on nurturing their only son. But surely, in a crisis, blood would prove thicker than water. The day he broke the news to Natalie, something in her demeanor shifted. "Surgery? For how long will you be incapacitated?" she asked, her voice tight. 3 months minimum before I can return to work," he answered. "My insurance covers most of it, but there's still a $50,000 gap for the specialist I need." Natalie had paced their living room, her hands twisting nervously. "You should call your parents. They've got money." What Damien did not know was that this conversation marked the beginning of the end. While he was scheduling medical consultations and preparing his firm for his absence, Natalie was making plans of her own. "I need to focus on my career right now," she told him, avoiding his eyes. "Huxley is offering me a chance to co-curate a touring exhibition. It's a huge opportunity." Damien had nodded, swallowing his disappointment. "Of course, we'll figure it out." In reality, Natalie had been emptying their joint accounts for months, siphoning funds into a private account Damien knew nothing about. Her relationship with Huxley had progressed from professional to intimate, and as Damien's health deteriorated, her disinterest in their marriage grew increasingly apparent. What Damien could not have anticipated was how the impending crisis would reveal not just his wife's true character, but the devastating truth about his parents' loyalties as well. The morning of Natalie's arrest came without warning. Damien was reviewing his medical options when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check the news. Your wife's been arrested outside the Royalton Hotel." The local news site confirmed it. Natalie Rousseau had been arrested alongside Huxley Milan for possession of illegal substances. The accompanying photo showed her being escorted to a police car, her face contorted with panic as Huxley was handcuffed beside her. Numb with shock, Damien drove to the police station where an officer confirmed that Natalie and Huxley had been caught with cocaine during a police sweep of a hotel known for drug activity. "She's asking for you," the officer said with a look of pity. When Damien entered the visitation room, Natalie's composure crumbled. "Damien, thank goodness, you have to help me." This is all a misunderstanding. The drugs were Huxley's. I did not know anything about them. How long? Damien asked quietly. What? How long have you been with him, Natalie? Her silence was confirmation enough. Tears streaked her makeup as she whispered, I need $75,000 for bail. Please, Damien. I say not stay here. Damien laughed bitterly. That's more than I need for my surgery. The surgery you could not be bothered to help me with. I'll pay you back. I swear. Just do not leave me here. Damien stood, a strange calm overtaking him. I'm not the one who left, Natalie. He walked out, ignoring her pleas. Later that evening, he received a call from his father. What is wrong with you? Walter Rousseau demanded. Your wife is in jail, and you redoing nothing? Damien explained the situation. Natalie's affair, his upcoming surgery, his need for financial help. There was a pause before Walter responded coldly. Your mother and I have decided to help Natalie with her bail. What about my surgery? Damien asked incredulously. Son, be reasonable. Natalie's in real trouble. Your situation can wait. When Damien called his mother seeking support, Diana Rousseau's response struck even deeper. Natalie's always been special to us, Damien. You know that. She needs our help right now. Special to you? More than your own son? Damien's voice broke. I could die without this surgery. His mother's voice turned brittle. Do not be dramatic. If one of you has to go, it's better you than her. The words hit like physical blows. She's always been our priority. Diana continued. You've never quite lived up to our expectations. You're on your own with this. Damien sat in stunned silence before responding with eerie calm. Thanks for showing me where I stand. Later that week, he watched from his car as his parents emerged from the courthouse with Natalie, Walter's arm protectively around her shoulders. They emptied their retirement savings, nearly $200,000, to secure her freedom and hire a top defense attorney. That night, as Damien sat alone in his home staring at medical bills, something broke inside him. The dutiful son, the loyal husband, those men died that night. In their place rose someone new, calculating, patient, and utterly devoid of forgiveness. 3 days later, Natalie returned home to collect her things, accompanied by his parents. I'm sorry it ended this way, she said, not meeting his eyes. But you can see I've got a lot going on right now. I filed for divorce. Damien watched silently as she packed her belongings. His father cleared his throat awkwardly. Son, we hope you understand. Natalie's facing serious charges. She needs support, and I do not. Damien asked quietly. You've always been resilient, his mother offered. Natalie's more delicate. As they prepared to leave, Damien spoke one final time. You've made your choice. Remember that. None of them recognized the weight of his words or the promise they contained. Damien's savings covered only part of his medical expenses. With no help forthcoming from his parents or soon-to-be ex-wife, he was forced to make difficult decisions. He sold his car, liquidated investments, and took out loans against his business. The surgery was scheduled for the earliest possible date, a less experienced surgeon accepting his case at a discounted rate. The night before the procedure, Damien sat alone in his hospital room, updating his will. If he died on the operating table, his possessions would go to Brendan Torres with specific instructions to ensure nothing reached Natalie or his parents. You really going through with this alone? Brendan asked. Concern etched across his face as he visited Damien that evening. Not much choice, Damien replied, his voice hollow. Everyone who was supposed to care apparently has better things to do. What Damien did not share was the cold clarity that had settled over him during the past weeks. If he survived, nothing would be the same. The old Damien, trusting, forgiving, eager to please, was already gone. The surgery lasted 8 hours. When Damien finally opened his eyes, Dr. Kaminsky was smiling down at him. We got it all, she said. The tumor was smaller than we expected. You're going to make a full recovery. During his 2-week hospital stay, neither Natalie nor his parents visited. Only Brendan came regularly, bringing food and news from the outside world. The divorce papers arrived via courier on day 9 of his recovery. Natalie was demanding half of everything, including his business. She's got some nerve, Brendan growled after reading the documents. She's panicking, Damien replied calmly. Her court date's coming up. Huxley's family has money, but they cut him off. She needs assets. What surprised Brendan was Damien's reaction. Not anger, but a slow, calculating smile as he signed the papers without contest. You, giving her what she wants? Brendan asked incredulously. For now, Damien replied. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. The recovery period stretched from the predicted 3 months to nearly 6. During this time, Damien lived frugally in a small apartment. His beautiful home sold to cover medical debts. His firm stayed afloat thanks to Brendan and his project manager, Gwen Mahoney, stepping in to handle client relationships. While his body healed, Damien's mind worked tirelessly. He spent hours researching his parents' financial situation, Natalie's legal troubles, and Huxley Milan's background. He discovered that his father, once a successful investment banker, had been forced into early retirement after a scandal involving improper client relationships. His parents' lavish lifestyle was maintained through careful image management and increasingly desperate financial maneuvers. Natalie, meanwhile, had pleaded guilty to lesser charges, avoiding jail time but receiving 3 years probation. She and Huxley had moved in together, using money from Damien's assets to open a small gallery. For months after his surgery, Damien was declared fully recovered. He returned to work with renewed focus, taking on high-profile projects and rebuilding his firm's reputation. To those who knew him casually, he seemed remarkably resilient, even cheerful. But Brendan noticed the changes. The hardness in his friend's eyes, the calculated precision with which he now approached every aspect of his life. Are you really okay? Brendan asked during a rare moment when they were alone in Damien's office. Damien looked up from his computer, his expression unreadable. I'm more than okay. I'm finally seeing clearly. You, replanning something are not you? Damien's smile did not reach his eyes. Let's just say I've realized that family is not always blood, and debts are not always financial. That evening, Damien began implementing the first phase of a plan that had been forming since the day his mother had coldly stated he was expendable. He made a call to Lawrence Kittredge, his parents' financial advisor and an old family acquaintance. Lawrence, it's Damien Rousseau, he said smoothly. I've been doing some thinking about my future investments. I could use your expertise. As he hung up the phone, Damien opened a notebook where he sketched out a timeline. At the top of the page, he written a single phrase, for months to zero. Lawrence Kittredge met Damien at an upscale Boston restaurant, clearly surprised by the invitation. The financial advisor had always dealt primarily with Walter Rousseau, barely acknowledging Damien during family functions. You looking well, Lawrence said, studying Damien with curious eyes. I heard about your health troubles. And the divorce. News travels fast, Damien replied with a practiced smile. But that's all behind me now. I'm more interested in discussing some investment opportunities. Over an expensive meal that Damien could barely afford, he spun a convincing tale about a new development project, a luxury condominium complex requiring significant capital. The returns, he promised, would be substantial. My parents always spoke highly of your investment acumen, Damien said, refilling Lawrence's wine glass. I thought of you immediately for this opportunity. Lawrence's professional caution warred visibly with his greed. Your parents have not mentioned any reconciliation between you. That's because there has not been one, Damien admitted frankly. But business is business. They do not need to know about our arrangement. By the end of the meal, Lawrence had agreed to review Damien's prospectus and potentially bring in select clients, including, Damien hoped, Walter and Diana Rousseau. Back in his apartment, Damien added Lawrence's name to his meticulously organized wall chart. String-connected photographs, documents, and handwritten notes, a physical manifestation of the intricate revenge he was orchestrating. Gwen Mahoney watched with concern as Damien worked late into the night at the office, his intensity bordering on obsession. "You've changed," she observed one evening, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "Since the surgery." Damien looked up, momentarily dropping his guard. "Would not you? My wife cheated, my parents abandoned me, and I nearly died alone." Gwen's expression softened. "Not everyone is like them, Damien." "I know," he replied, his mask slipping back into place. "That's why you got that promotion." The promotion had been strategic. Gwen was now officially a partner in the firm, with access to all client relationships and projects. What she did not know was that this was part of Damien's insurance policy. If his plans went sideways, the business would survive without him. Meanwhile, Damien's investigation into Huxley Milan yielded valuable information. The gallery owner came from old money but had been cut off by his family due to his repeated legal troubles. His new gallery with Natalie was struggling financially, their artistic vision proving less commercially viable than anticipated. Most crucially, Damien discovered that Huxley's family owned significant property throughout New England, including a historic building in Providence that Damien's parents had been trying to acquire for years to convert into a bed and breakfast for their retirement. Through careful manipulation and a series of anonymous tips, Damien arranged for his parents to learn about Natalie and Huxley's financial difficulties. As he predicted, Diana and Walter reached out to offer help, inviting the couple to dinner at their Providence home. Damien received confirmation of this meeting through a private investigator he hired to monitor his parents' activities. The pieces were falling into place. Next, Damien approached Vincent Prescott, a wealthy developer known for his ruthless business tactics. Vincent had tried to hire Damien's firm multiple times, but Damien had always declined, uncomfortable with the man's reputation for cutting corners on safety. "I've reconsidered your Harborside project," Damien told Vincent during their meeting, "but I have conditions." Vincent leaned forward, intrigued. "Name them." "I need access to your legal team and your connections at Providence City Hall." Vincent's eyebrows rose. "This sounds personal, not professional." "It can be both," Damien replied smoothly. "You get my firm's reputation attached to your development. I get the resources I need for a private matter." By the end of the week, Damien had secured not only a lucrative contract but also introductions to key officials in Providence's zoning department and Vincent's personal attorney, a shark named Sofia Mendez, who specialized in finding legal loopholes. The second phase of Damien's plan required direct access to his parents' financial information. For this, he needed to get close to them again, a prospect that filled him with cold rage. Yet he maintained his composure as he drafted a carefully worded email, suggesting a tentative reconciliation. "I've had time to reflect during my recovery," he wrote. "While I see not forget what happened, perhaps we can find a path forward. Life is too short for permanent estrangements." His mother's response came within hours, eager, relieved, but without a hint of genuine remorse. They arranged to meet the following weekend in Providence. Brendan was furious when he learned of the planned meeting. "After everything they did, they left you to suffer, Damien." "I know exactly what they did," Damien replied, his voice unervingly calm. "Trust me on this." The reconciliation lunch was a masterclass in deception. Damien played the forgiving son perfectly, accepting his parents' half-hearted apologies with apparent grace. "We were in an impossible position," Diana explained, patting Natalie's hand affectionately. The younger woman had been invited at Diana's insistence. "Natalie needed immediate help. We always knew you'd find a way through your situation. You've always been resourceful," Walter added. "We proud of how you've bounced back." Damien smiled thinly. "Family is family," he said, raising his glass in a toast that his parents eagerly joined. What they could not see was the predatory gleam in their son's eyes, or understand that they had just sealed their fate. The false reconciliation progressed exactly as Damien had planned. Within weeks, he was regularly invited to his parents' home, where they proudly showed off their latest acquisitions and boasted about their financial acumen. We re-finalizing the purchase of the Blackwell property next month. Walter announced during one dinner. It's going to be the crown jewel of our retirement plan, an exclusive bed and breakfast for the Providence elite. Damien nodded appreciatively. Sounds perfect. Have you secured all the financing? Almost. Diana interjected. Lawrence is helping us liquidate some investments. We a bit cash poor at the moment after helping Natalie and Huxley with their legal expenses and the gallery. I might be able to help with that, Damien offered casually. My firm's handling a development that needs additional investors. The returns would more than cover your shortfall for the Blackwell purchase. Walter's interest was immediately piqued. What kind of returns are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 30% within 18 months. The trap was set. Within days, Lawrence Kittredge contacted Damien to schedule a meeting with Walter and Diana. The fictional development project, Riverside Heights, was presented with impressive renderings, meticulously falsified market analyses, and testimonials from early investors who were actually actors hired through Vincent's connections. This looks incredible, Walter said, studying the prospectus. Why have not I heard about this opportunity before? We've kept it quiet, Damien explained. Too much attention drives up land costs. We were only approaching select investors with the liquidity to move quickly. By the end of the meeting, Walter and Diana had committed to investing $850,000, nearly all of their remaining liquid assets. Lawrence Kittredge, seduced by the promised commission, facilitated the transfer to an escrow account that Damien had established through Sofia Mendez. Meanwhile, Damien implemented the next phase of his plan. Through Vincent's connections at Providence City Hall, he arranged for a comprehensive review of the Blackwell property's zoning status. The review discovered several critical issues that would prevent its conversion to a commercial establishment. Simultaneously, Damien approached Huxley Milan with a business proposition. Over drinks at an exclusive club, he made an unexpected offer. I want to invest in your gallery, Damien stated, watching shock register on Huxley's face. You joking? Huxley replied, eyes narrowing. After everything with Natalie? This is not about Natalie, Damien responded smoothly. It's about the Blackwell building. Huxley's expression shifted from suspicion to interest. What about it? I know your family owns it. I know my parents are trying to buy it. And I know you could use the capital more than your family needs that particular property. The meeting ended with a tentative agreement. Huxley would convince his family to delay the sale to Walter and Diana while considering Damien's investment offer. What Huxley did not know was that Damien had already arranged for Sofia to file paperwork challenging the Milan family's clear title to the property, citing historical preservation concerns that would tie up the property in court for years. Back at his apartment, Damien updated his wall chart, connecting new strings between photographs, documents, and timeline markers. The plan was unfolding perfectly. His parents' money was now under his control in the escrow account. Their retirement property dreams were being systematically dismantled, and Natalie and Huxley were being drawn deeper into his web. Gwen noticed Damien's increasingly frequent absences from the office. The Prescott contract is huge, she remarked during a project meeting. But you seem distracted by something else. Just tying up loose ends from the past year, Damien replied, his tone discouraging further questions. In truth, Damien was executing the most delicate part of his plan. Through careful manipulation of digital records facilitated by specialists recommended by Vincent, he created a paper trail suggesting that Walter had misappropriated client funds during his final years at the investment firm. The evidence was fabricated but convincing, building on rumors that had circulated around Walter's early retirement. Damien also arranged for anonymous tips to reach the Massachusetts State Attorney's office regarding potential financial improprieties involving Walter Russo and Lawrence Kittredge. The investigation would find nothing definitive, but the mere existence of an inquiry would damage reputations and create significant stress. As these pieces fell into place, Damien received an unexpected call from Natalie. We need to talk, she said, her voice tight with anxiety. In person, they met at a quiet cafe near his office. Natalie looked thinner, her once immaculate appearance now showing signs of strain. Huxley says you want to invest in our gallery, she began, studying him with suspicious eyes. Why would you do that after everything? Damien shrugged. Business is business. Your gallery has potential despite its current struggles. And how do you know about our struggles? She demanded. The art world talks, he replied simply. But that's not why you wanted to meet, is it? Natalie's composure cracked slightly. Your parents' investment in that property fell through. They've been counting on it for their retirement. Diana's beside herself. That's unfortunate, Damien said, sipping his coffee calmly. But what does it have to do with me? They've put money into some development project of yours, Natalie pressed. Riverside Heights. They recounting on those returns now more than ever. Damien allowed a flicker of surprise to cross his face. They told you about that investment? We family, Natalie replied defensively. They tell me everything. The revelation, while not entirely unexpected, confirmed what Damien had long suspected. The alliance between his ex-wife and parents went deeper than he initially believed. They were sharing financial information, making decisions as a unit, with Damien firmly on the outside, despite the facade of reconciliation. The development is proceeding as planned, he assured her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. They have nothing to worry about. As Natalie left, Damien made a call to Sofia Mendez. Move the timetable up, he instructed. It's time for Phase 3. 3 months after his parents invested in the fictional Riverside Heights development, Damien executed the final preparations for his revenge. Through Sofia Mendez, he transferred most of the funds from the escrow account to a series of offshore entities established under Vincent Prescott's guidance. A small portion remained as proof of the investment's existence. Meanwhile, he arranged for Lawrence Kittredge to receive an official-looking letter from the state attorney's office requesting information about specific client accounts, including Walter Rousseau's. Though the letter was fabricated, its effect was immediate. Lawrence panicked and contacted Walter, who in turn called an emergency family meeting. Damien arrived at his parents' home to find not only Walter and Diana but also Natalie and Huxley. The atmosphere was tense, with Walter pacing the living room clutching a glass of scotch. There's an investigation, Walter announced without preamble. Something about client accounts for my last years at the firm. It's nothing but a fishing expedition, Diana added quickly. Your father did nothing wrong. Damien adopted a concerned expression. What can I do to help? We may need to access our investment in Riverside Heights, Walter said bluntly. How quickly can we liquidate our position? Damien frowned thoughtfully. That would be difficult right now. We're at a critical phase of development. Pulling out would mean significant penalties. How significant? Walter demanded. 60% of your investment at minimum. The room erupted in protests. Walter accused Damien of hiding the penalty clause, while Diana tearfully proclaimed that their retirement was at stake. Natalie and Huxley exchanged worried glances, their own financial future clearly tied to Walter and Diana's stability. There may be another option, Damien suggested once the initial outburst subsided. I could potentially buy out your position personally. You'd take a smaller loss, say 20%, but you'd have immediate liquidity. After a heated discussion, Walter and Diana reluctantly agreed. Damien promised to have the paperwork ready within 24 hours. Back at his apartment, Damien prepared the final elements of his plan. The buyout agreement, drafted by Sofia, contained carefully worded clauses that effectively transferred ownership of his parents' remaining assets to Damien in exchange for the return of their investment. Simultaneously, he arranged for Vincent's contacts to leak information about the investigation to Walter's former colleagues and social circle. Within days, the Russos found themselves subtly excluded from Providence society events as rumors spread. The pressure mounted when Lawrence Kittredge received a genuine audit notice from financial regulators, the result of anonymous tips Damien had arranged. Lawrence immediately distanced himself from Walter, refusing further contact until the misunderstanding was resolved. When Damien delivered the buyout agreement to his parents, they were too desperate to read the fine print. They signed everything, grateful for the lifeline their son appeared to be throwing them. You're saving our reputation, Diana said, squeezing Damien's hand. I always knew you'd make us proud eventually. Walter nodded in agreement. Blood tells in the end, you stepped up when we needed you. Damien smiled thinly. Family is everything, he replied, the words tasting like ash. The next morning, Walter and Diana awoke to find their bank accounts significantly lower than expected. The buyout had provided only $300,000 of their $850,000 investment, the promised 80% return. Frantic calls to Damien went unanswered. When they finally reached him that afternoon, his tone had changed completely. The agreement specified that the funds would be released in stages, he explained coldly. The remainder is contingent on the resolution of certain legal matters. What legal matters? Walter demanded. The paperwork said nothing about this. Page 17, Clause 12, Damien replied. I suggest you read it carefully. The clause in question tied the remaining payment to a comprehensive release of any claims Walter and Diana might have against Damien, including medical support obligations that could be retroactively applied under Massachusetts family law. "This is outrageous," Walter sputtered. "You trying to rob us?" "Interesting perspective," Damien replied calmly. "Considering you left me to suffer when I needed surgery." The line went silent for a moment before Diana spoke, her voice trembling. "Is that what this is about? You punishing us for helping Natalie instead?" "I'm not punishing anyone," Damien countered. "I'm simply protecting my interests, as you taught me to do." When they threatened legal action, Damien reminded them that any lawsuit would bring public attention to Walter's financial investigation. "Besides," he added, "I doubt you can afford a protracted legal battle right now." That evening, Natalie called Damien, her voice shrill with panic. "What are you doing? Your parents are devastated." "I'm surprised you care," Damien replied, "given how quickly you abandoned me when I was the one in crisis." "That was different," Natalie protested. "I was facing jail time. And I was facing death," Damien said quietly. "Yet here we are, both still standing. Interesting how that worked out." The next day, Damien informed Vincent Prescott that he was withdrawing from the Harborside project. "My firm's reputation ca not be associated with your methods after all," he explained, knowing the developer would be furious but powerless to retaliate without exposing his own questionable practices. For months after his parents had emptied their savings to bail out Natalie, the same parents who had told him, "If one of you has to go, it's better you than her," Damien had systematically dismantled their financial security, social standing, and retirement plans. The calls began immediately, first pleading, then angry, finally desperate. "Please, just one conversation," Walter's voice message begged after Damien blocked their numbers. "We need to work this out as a family." Damien saved each message, listening to them at night with a glass of whiskey in hand. His wall chart was nearly complete, red strings connecting all the elements of his revenge. Only the final phase remained. 6 weeks after cutting contact with his parents, Damien received a hand-delivered letter from Diana. The elegant stationery could not disguise the desperation in her words as she described their deteriorating situation. Walter's health was failing under the stress. They were being forced to sell their home, and former friends were avoiding them due to rumors about financial impropriety. "We know we made a terrible mistake," she wrote. "Please, Damien, if there's any chance for reconciliation, we're begging for one final conversation." Damien studied the letter dispassionately before adding it to his collection of evidence. The timing aligned perfectly with his plans. Through Gwen, who remained unaware of his personal vendetta, Damien arranged for his firm to purchase a historic commercial building in downtown Providence, the very building that housed Huxley and Natalie's struggling gallery. The purchase was made through a shell company, concealing Damien's involvement until the final paperwork was signed. 2 days later, all tenants received notice that the building would be renovated, requiring evacuation within 30 days. For Huxley and Natalie, who had invested everything in the gallery's specific location and had a 10-year lease, this was devastating news. Natalie arrived unannounced at Damien's office the following morning, security barely managing to keep her from storming past reception. "You did this on purpose," she shouted as Damien calmly invited her into his private office. "You know we not afford to relocate." "Business is business," Damien replied, echoing his earlier words. "The building is being repurposed. Our lease has a termination clause for change of ownership," Damien interrupted smoothly. Page 24, paragraph 6. "I suggest you read your contracts more carefully in the future." Natalie's face crumpled in genuine fear. "We'll lose everything." "How unfortunate," Damien observed, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Perhaps your parents-in-law can help." "Oh wait, they've already emptied their savings on your behalf, have not they?" When Natalie left, shaken and tearful, Gwen entered with a concerned expression. "Want to tell me what that was about? And why we suddenly own a building in Providence that does not fit our portfolio?" "It's complicated," Damien admitted. "But necessary." Gwen studied him for a long moment. "Whatever you redoing, be careful it does not consume you." Her words lingered as Damien prepared for the final confrontation. He had agreed to meet his parents at a restaurant of his choosing, a private room at an exclusive Boston establishment where Vincent Prescott frequently conducted business. The room was equipped with recording devices that Vincent had offered to Damien as a parting gift from their brief partnership. Walter and Diana arrived visibly diminished. His father's confident posture was gone, replaced by a slight stoop. His mother had lost weight, her designer clothes hanging loosely on her frame. Natalie and Huxley accompanied them, completing the tableau of Damien's betrayers. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Walter began, his voice hoarse with suppressed emotion. "We need to clear the air." "I'm listening," Damien replied, his expression neutral as he recorded the conversation on his phone. What followed was a tortured explanation of their actions, how they had always seen Natalie as the daughter they never had, how they had been caught in an impossible situation, how they had believed Damien would find a way through his medical crisis without their help. "We made a terrible mistake," Diana concluded, tears streaming down her face. "We see that now." "And what exactly do you want from me?" Damien asked, his voice cold. Walter cleared his throat. "We need financial help, son. The legal bills, the failed property purchase, the investment we ruined. Not to mention our gallery," Huxley added, "which is being forced to close because of the building sale." Damien sipped his water, studying each face around the table. "So you want money?" "We want a chance to make things right," Diana insisted. "As a family." "A family," Damien repeated, the word hollow. "Like when you said if one of you has to go, it's better you than her." Diana flinched visibly. "I was upset." "I did not mean you meant every word," Damien interrupted. "Just as you meant it when you said she's always been your priority and that I was on my own." He turned to Natalie. "And you, the surgery can wait while you were emptying our accounts for months, planning your exit while I was fighting for my life." Natalie paled. "How did you know about the account?" "I did not until just now. But thanks for confirming my suspicions." Damien opened a folder he brought with him, removing several documents. "Here's what's going to happen. These are declarations of debt, one for each of you. They acknowledge that you owe me specific amounts. $200,000 from my parents for the bail money that should have gone to my medical care. $175,000 from Natalie for the funds she stole from our joint accounts. And $75,000 from Huxley for legal expenses I incurred during the divorce that his actions necessitated." "This is absurd," Walter protested. "We do not have this money." "Then you'll have to find it," Damien replied calmly. "Otherwise, I'll be forced to pursue other remedies." "Like what?" Huxley demanded. Damien smiled thinly. "For starters, I have evidence suggesting my father misappropriated client funds before his retirement. Anonymous for now, but that could change." Walter blanched. "You would not." "I have documentation of Natalie's embezzlement from our accounts. Fraud charges would violate her probation." Natalie gasped. "Damien, please," and Huxley. "I've discovered some interesting connections between your family South real estate holdings and certain zoning officials. The appearance of impropriety alone would trigger investigations." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Diana spoke, her voice trembling. "What do you really want, Damien?" "Justice," he replied simply. "You left me to suffer. You chose someone else over your own son. Actions have consequences." He stood, gathering his papers. "Sign the acknowledgements of debt. You have 30 days to begin repayment, or I release everything I have to the appropriate authorities." As Damien walked out, leaving them stunned and broken, he felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not triumph. Not even anger. Only a cold, empty certainty that those who had betrayed him would never do so again. The aftermath of Damien's revenge unfolded with mathematical precision. His parents, financially ruined and socially ostracized, were forced to sell their Providence home and move to a modest apartment. Walter's health deteriorated rapidly under the stress, resulting in a minor stroke that left him with a permanent limp. Diana reached out continuously, her messages alternating between desperate pleas and bitter recriminations. "How could you do this to your own father?" she demanded in one particularly emotional voicemail. "After everything we did for you growing up?" Damien listened to each message impassively before archiving it with the others. The collection of evidence continued to grow, insurance against any attempt they might make to retaliate. Natalie and Huxley fared no better. With their gallery shuttered and no capital to relocate, they declared bankruptcy. Huxley's family, already disillusioned with his choices, refused further assistance. Natalie's probation officer noted the financial instability with concern, increasing the frequency of her required check-ins. Brendan watched Damien's transformation with growing alarm. "You've changed," he observed during a rare dinner together. "And not for the better." "I've become realistic," Damien countered. "I learned who people really are. Not everyone is like them," Brendan insisted. "You've built walls so high that no one can get in anymore." The observation struck closer to home than Damien wanted to admit. His revenge had consumed him so completely that other aspects of his life had withered. The firm was thriving, but personally he had become isolated. His entire focus had narrowed to the systematic destruction of those who had betrayed him. 3 weeks after the restaurant confrontation, Walter appeared unannounced at Damien's office. Security called up asking whether to admit him. Send him up, Damien decided after a moment's consideration. Walter looked even worse than before, gaunt, gray, leaning heavily on a cane. 5 minutes, he requested. That's all I ask. Damien gestured to a chair without speaking. I've been thinking about what happened before your surgery, Walter began, his voice unsteady. About what your mother and I said and did or did not do, Damien amended coldly. Walter nodded, accepting the correction. There's no excuse. We failed you completely. Is this supposed to be an apology? It's an explanation, Walter replied, not a justification. We always saw ourselves as progressive, enlightened people. Having a daughter would have completed that self-image. When you were born instead, Damien stared at his father, genuinely surprised for the first time in months. You resented me for being a son. Not consciously, Walter said, shaking his head. But there was always something missing in how we connected with you. When Natalie came along so vibrant and artistic, she filled that unnamed gap. We transferred our dreams onto her. So I was a disappointment from birth, Damien summarized flatly. We were the disappointment, Walter corrected, tears welling in his eyes. We failed as parents in the most fundamental way possible. I do not expect forgiveness, Damien. I just wanted you to understand that the flaw was never in you. It was always in us. Damien sat motionless, his carefully constructed veneer of indifference cracking slightly. Why tell me this now? Because I had another minor stroke last week, Walter replied with brutal honesty. And I realized I might die without you knowing the truth. After Walter left, Damien remained at his desk for hours, staring at the wall. For the first time since his surgery, he questioned the path he had chosen, not the justice of his revenge that remained unassailable in his mind, but the cost to himself. The next day, he made an unexpected decision. Through Sofia Mendez, he arranged for his parents to receive a small monthly stipend, enough to cover basic necessities but not their previous lifestyle. The money would come through a trust with no direct connection to Damien. They would never know it came from him. Why bother? Sofia asked when he gave the instructions. After everything they did? It's not about them, Damien replied. It's about who I choose to be. For Natalie and Huxley, however, there would be no such mercy. Damien ensured that their bankruptcy proceedings were particularly thorough, with every asset scrutinized. When Huxley attempted to hide valuable artwork, Damien's investigators discovered it and reported the fraud to the court. Natalie made one final attempt to appeal to Damien, catching him as he left his office building. We completely destroyed, she said, her designer clothes replaced by cheap, ill-fitting alternatives. Is not that enough? You chose this path, Damien reminded her. When you decided I was expendable. I never wanted you to suffer, she protested. I fell in love with Huxley. It was wrong how I handled it. But it was not malicious. Damien studied her dispassionately. When I needed you most, you abandoned me. Actions have consequences, Natalie. You reliving with yours now. As she walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat, Damien felt the first stirrings of something like closure. The ledger was not balanced, it never could be, but the scales had shifted. That evening, Damien dismantled the wall chart in his apartment, carefully filing away the evidence but disposing of the photographs and personal notes. It was time to look forward rather than back. 6 months after Walter's unexpected office visit, Damien received news that his father had suffered a major stroke. Diana's message was brief and factual. Walter was in critical condition at Providence General Hospital. No plea for Damien to visit was included. They had finally accepted the permanence of the breach. Damien sat with the information for a full day before making his decision. He would go to the hospital not for reconciliation but for closure. The hospital room was dimly lit when he arrived. Walter lay unconscious, connected to various monitors, looking small and frail against the white sheets. Diana sat beside him, her once perfect appearance now perpetually disheveled. She looked up as Damien entered, genuine shock registering on her face. You came. Not for the reasons you might hope, Damien replied, keeping his distance. How is he? The doctors say it's a waiting game now, Diana said, her voice hollow. They do not expect him to regain consciousness. Damien nodded, studying the man who had contributed to his DNA but had failed in the most fundamental aspects of fatherhood. Has Natalie been here? Diana's expression tightened. No, she and Huxley moved to Chicago last month. They've distanced themselves since our financial troubles. How ironic, Damien observed, unable to suppress a bitter smile. The daughter you chose over your son abandoned you when you were no longer useful. Please, Diana whispered, not now. Damien took a seat on the opposite side of the bed. I'm not here to argue. I wanted to see him one last time. They sat in uncomfortable silence until a doctor entered to check Walter's vitals. After he left, Diana spoke again, her voice barely audible. "I know you'll never forgive us," she said. "And I do not blame you. But I need you to know that we did love you, Damien. Imperfectly. Inadequately. But it was there. Love without action is meaningless," Damien replied quietly. "You proved that when it mattered most." Walter's condition deteriorated overnight. By morning, the doctors were discussing end-of-life care. Damien remained at the hospital, maintaining his emotional distance but unwilling to leave before the conclusion. In the cafeteria, he encountered Gwen, who had come after hearing about Walter's condition. "You did not have to come," Damien said, surprised by her presence. "That's what friends do," she replied simply. "Even when you push them away." Her words cut through Damien's carefully constructed defenses. For the first time since his surgery, he felt something crack inside him. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the potential for healing. "I do not know who I am anymore," he admitted quietly. "Everything that's happened, it changed me." Gwen nodded. "Trauma does that. But change does not have to be permanent. You can choose who you become next." Walter Rousseau died at 3:42 a.m., never regaining consciousness. Damien was present, watching the monitor's flatline with a complex mixture of emotions he could not fully name. Diana broke down, decades of complicated history pouring out in gut-wrenching sobs. Surprising himself, Damien reached across the bed and took her hand. It was not forgiveness that remained impossible, but a small acknowledgement of shared humanity in the face of death. The funeral was sparsely attended. Most of Walter and Diana's social circle had abandoned them after their financial disgrace. Natalie and Huxley sent flowers but did not appear in person. Brendan came to support Damien, as did Gwen and a few loyal employees from the firm. Diana approached Damien after the service, her expression hesitant. "Will you come to the house? There are some papers Walter wanted you to have." The house was now a 2-bedroom apartment in a modest complex filled with remnants of their former life that looked out of place in the cramped space. Diana retrieved a manila envelope from a drawer, handing it to Damien with trembling hands. "He prepared this after his first stroke," she explained. "Said it was important you receive it whether you wanted it or not." Inside, Damien found legal documents transferring ownership of a small property in Maine, a lakeside cabin that had belonged to Walter's father. There was also a handwritten letter dated 3 months earlier. "Damien, this cabin is the only thing I have left that is not tainted by the mistakes I made with you. My father taught me to fish here, to build fires, to be a man. I failed to pass those lessons to you, not because you were not worthy, but because I was too blind to see your worth. You owe me nothing. I owe you everything. This property is yours by right, the one true inheritance I can offer. Do with it what you will. Your father in name, if not in deed, Walter." Damien refolded the letter carefully, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for giving me this. What will you do now?" Diana asked, her voice small. "Continue living my life," Damien replied simply, "as I have been. And me." Damien studied his mother, this woman who had once told him he was expendable, who had chosen another over her own son, who now stood alone and broken before him. "The monthly stipend will continue," he said finally. "You will not starve or be homeless. Beyond that, we have nothing more to discuss." Diana's eyes widened. "The money, that was you. It does not change anything between us," Damien stated firmly. "It's simply what I decided to do." As Damien prepared to leave, Diana spoke once more. "I saw you talking to that woman at the funeral, your colleague. She seems to care about you." "Gwen is a good person," Damien acknowledged. "One of the few I've encountered." "Do not punish everyone for what we did," Diana said softly. "That would be our final victory over you." The words followed Damien as he drove back to Boston. Had his quest for justice transformed into something darker? Had he allowed his parents' betrayal to define his entire worldview? 2 weeks later, Damien received a call from Natalie's attorney. She and Huxley were divorcing. He had left her for a wealthy Chicago art collector. Now destitute and desperate, Natalie was seeking to reopen their divorce settlement, claiming duress during the original proceedings. She's asking for support payments, the attorney explained awkwardly. "Given your current financial success and the length of your marriage, no," Damien replied simply. "Not a chance. Mr. Rousseau, the courts may review the evidence I've compiled regarding her financial activities during our marriage," Damien interrupted coldly. "Evidence I've refrained from sharing with her probation officer out of, let's call it restraint." The attorney backed down immediately. "I'll convey your position to my client." That evening, Damien visited the cabin in Maine for the first time. The small, rustic structure sat on a pristine lakefront surrounded by pine trees. Inside, he found fishing gear, old books, and photographs, including several of himself as a small boy standing beside Walter, both smiling in rare moments of connection. Standing on the dock as sunset painted the water crimson, Damien made a decision. He would not sell the cabin as he had initially planned. Instead, he would keep it not as a monument to reconciliation but as a reminder of complexity. Back in Boston, he invited Gwen to dinner at a small, unpretentious restaurant they had frequented before his surgery. "To what do I owe this honor?" she asked with gentle sarcasm. "You've barely been social for over a year." "I'm considering some changes," Damien replied honestly. "And I value your perspective." Over the meal, he shared edited versions of the events that had consumed him, his parents, betrayal, his methodical response, the recent aftermath. Gwen listened without judgment, asking occasional clarifying questions. "So what now?" she asked when he finished. "Revenge accomplished, enemies vanquished. What does Damien Rousseau do with the rest of his life?" The question hung between them, simple yet profound. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "But I know I do not want to be defined by what they did anymore." "That essay start," Gwen said, raising her glass in a toast to new beginnings. Damien clinked his glass against hers, allowing himself to consider possibilities beyond the narrowly focused existence he had created. The path forward was not clear. But for the first time since waking from surgery, he felt something like genuine potential. 1 month later, Damien received a final message from Natalie, a handwritten letter forwarded through her attorney. "Damien, I would not ask for forgiveness because I do not deserve it. What I did was unforgivable. When you needed me most, I chose myself. When you were fighting for your life, I was planning my escape. Huxley has left me for someone wealthier, someone more useful to him. The irony is not lost on me. I'm experiencing a fraction of what I put you through, and it is unbearable. I do not expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you. And I'm sorry." Natalie. Damien read the letter twice before filing it away with his other documentation. There would be no response, no closure offered. Some bridges, once burned, should remain ashes. That weekend he returned to the cabin in Maine, bringing work plans for a potential renovation. As he stood on the dock, watching an eagle soar over the lake, he thought about the person he had become. Not the trusting, eager-to-please son who had been so thoroughly betrayed. Not the coldly calculating architect of ruin who had methodically destroyed those who had hurt him. Someone new was emerging, hardened by experience but not defined by it. Someone who understood that trust must be earned, loyalty must be proven, and justice, while necessary, was not the same as healing. Damien Rousseau would never forgive those who had betrayed him when he needed them most. That chapter was closed permanently. But perhaps in time he could forge a life where their betrayal was merely a prologue rather than the entire story. As he turned back toward the cabin, plans in hand for rebuilding what could be rebuilt, Damien felt something unexpected, not peace exactly, but possibility. And for now that was enough.